Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to first take a self-assessment of what you have done in the past. And that assessment should really highlight who are the clients that you've actually done work for? What do they look like? What sector do they come from? But also, at the same time, and I like to use event planners as an example because event planners have so much power to bring on other vendors. So if I'm an event planner, I honestly have the trust of my client to say, hey, we're going to use this catering company. We're going to use those customizations and they can build things. And we're going to use this customer for AV and or this vendor as a florist, et cetera, et cetera. I have that power. It's very rare that I get to a client who says, hey, these are all the vendors that I want to use. It's very rare for that to happen.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Events Demystified podcast brought to you by Trifan Events. I am your host, Anca Trifan, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you to my featured guest today, Andrew Robbie, CEO and event producer of his Washington, D.C. based company, Andrew Robbie Events. Used to adapting and pivoting, having transitioned from a successful Army career with frequent moves and deployments to becoming a leader in event planning. His resilience is like nobody else's, and that was certainly put to the test last year during the pandemic, like everybody else's. But his efforts to adapt helped him win the 40 Under 40 award in the corporate event industry. Andrew Robbie is a proud Army vet who happens to be a great event and wedding planner. He likes to call himself an event storyteller who is passionate about romantic weddings and engaging events, and he loves to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the event industry. How can we do and be better? How can we improve the way we produce events and how our clients experience them? And also work-life balance and what can be done to enjoy not working, which is such an interesting topic to discuss. I can't wait to do that because I'm definitely one of those people that have a hard time with not working. I met Andrew on LinkedIn, and his positive attitude and willingness to see people win, along with his courage to ask the hard questions, is what really drew me to him. And while we missed the opportunity to meet in person at IMAX this year, I can't wait to do that sometimes in the future. Well, let's bring Andrew in and learn more about him, his story, and his expertise. Welcome to the show, Andrew. What a pleasure it is to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is absolutely amazing. And the intro was awesome. Thank you so much.
First off, you're always like wearing the most amazing outfits ever. I'm not sure if you do that around the house or just like, in corporate event settings, but that is amazing.
Well, maybe sometimes around the house, yes, but not all the time. But yeah, I feel like, dressing up just makes you feel good. I think that it helps to bring out your personality and your style and just gives a different type of language that people can't always express verbally. So I love dressing up.
I agree. I love it. I mean, I'm European and we're used to like dressing up just to go to the grocery store. I don't do that anymore. But if you go to Europe, like you see those girls in like stilettos going to the grocery store and then carrying bags with groceries. And I'm like, what in the world? No, there's no way. But it's so good to have you here. Hey, I wanted to kick us off because we got so much to cover and to talk about. Here's one question that I want to kick us off with because I want it to be light and I want it to be funny. So do you have any funny event stories that you like to share with our audience right out of the gate?
Funny stories? Wow, I don't know.
Embarrassing stories? I'll take anything.
I'm not sure if I want to share it. I think one of the most funny stories that we ever had was one day we were setting up for our client, and our client wanted us to incorporate some elements into the design of their event. And we wasn't too sure of what these, elements were. All we knew is that they were going to bring in, a cart full of things, that we will put on the tables for all of the guests, etc. And so we got the box of, actually it was like, the hotel carts that you get to put your luggage on. They brought in 2 of those. And so here we are trying to go through all of the items that were in there. Some of the stuff we were just completely confused because they dropped it off without giving us instructions, and we didn't have time to really, ask them about these things. But in the one of the carts was a couple of bags, and in the bags were, I want to say like they were like marbles, but they weren't marbles. They were very soft, but I felt like maybe it was water on the inside, or it was gel on the inside or something. We had no idea what these hundreds of things were going to be used for. So we were planning to set them aside and then ask about it later. We pull up the bag, and as soon as we pulled the bag up, they all burst and fell to the floor, going everywhere, literally minutes before the event happened. And all we could do is just laugh because we were like, how are we going to get up hundreds of these small little gel balls or whatever, and we are rushing to ask the venue to give us brooms and dustpans to try to sweep this up so nobody would actually fall or create a trip hazard for that. So to me, that was probably the most weirdest moment that we've had when trying to pull together an event.
I mean, you're right. At that point, you're like, what else can we do? Or just gonna have to laugh because I mean, it's impossible to find all those tiny, things, whatever they went.
We got out most of them, but throughout the night, we just kept going and looking through the floor just to try to make sure we got everything. So no one fell, no one got injured, thankfully. Mercy.
So what were they supposed to be used for anyway? Did you find out eventually?
Have no idea. Didn't even get a chance to ask, but we just went with it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay, that is definitely funny. Well, let's talk about then event experience. Let's get right into it. How can we improve the way we produce events and how our clients experience them? Because that is one of the main probably questions that event professionals have been asking themselves just during this 20-something months of like trying to figure out virtual, hybrid, in person, whatever name we're going to give this new breed of events.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think that the first problem is trying to unlearn the herd mentality that we have in the event industry, right? And that herd mentality really is jumping on the bandwagon for what everybody else is doing. And that doesn't work for everyone. And unlearning those bad habits is really important because, one, as an event producer, my recommendation to my clients who are the event organizers are to make sure they understand their audience, understand the emotional side of their audience, understand the needs that they have, physically and virtually, because every event is completely different. And so if I'm applying what has been done and what is trending to my particular client or their guests, then it's not going to always work. So I have to figure out what has been done in the past, what's the historical data that they've used if they've produced an event before, right? And then understanding the why. I think the why of every single event is where, for instance, the secret sauce is, right? And understanding why an event is happening, what the end goal is for the event, helps to determine the experience that not only the client is going through, but also what experience the guests are going to have. Right now it's charity season. A lot of charities are using virtual and hybrid events to really raise money, and they've been hurt hard by the pandemic, but thankfully things are turning around for them to get back those sales goals or the donation goals that they've had. So trying to figure out what is going to be an emotional tie to their guests, to their donors, to cause them to give, right? And then the same thing for regular events or corporate events is, how am I going to create an atmosphere that is going to allow a person to say, you know what? I was surprised by this. It was truly welcomed, as far as the experience, the moments that I have, but also turning those guests into promoters and saying, you know what? I have to tell people about this. I have to get on social media and talk about it. I have to get on LinkedIn and create posts about this and why this experience was so meaningful to me. And we just have to break away from the traditional things. When I think about virtual events and when we started on virtual events, right? We all wanted to do a webinar. We all wanted to do a panel, and we wanted to throw in as many people on that panel as possible, and not really knowing or realizing that we were stifling them in their voice and all the expert advice that they were given, because we oversaturated the panel itself with so many people. And so simplicity is so important when it comes to events, and that we don't have to always be big and bold. We just have to understand what the journey is for the people attending those events and how we're going to elevate that journey to bring them back again and again and again, and then have them go out and talk about that event. So I think when we think of it in that sense and want to make sure the experience is welcomed and seen and heard, then we really have to focus on how our audience is navigating and how we want them to navigate as much as possible.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that you touch on all these touch points, because it's so important, that the why behind asking yourself, why am I doing this event in the first place? And let me just tell you from my own personal experience with just attending events, not necessarily from the planner and producer side, I love when there's a good experience that I will remember, because most likely that is what I walk away with. For example, just this last week, because it's still super fresh, coming back from IMAX, I did this Showgirl Bootcamp. I've never done anything like that before. And first off, it was an eye-opener. One, how heavy those head things are. I mean,
Right.
There's like 40 pounds of putting on your head and then having to look graceful and then dance with it. Obviously, my level of expertise was like goose walk. Like, okay, I'm just going to try to like not like have my head tip, because then I'm just like going to topple over. But it was one of the best experiences ever, because it's not something that I would do in regular life, right? Mm-hmm. But then I'm like, man, maybe I just discovered a new talent and skill. Plan B if the events don't work.
That's true. It's true, but I think a lot of times people feel like the programming has to be all educational. It has to be speakers and keynotes and panels giving out so much information and packing the schedules with that we fail to realize that when we pull our audience away from those activities, that we give them the opportunity to breathe, to rest, to get their minds to focus on other things, but also to absorb everything that they've just experienced, they've just gone through. And when we create those breaks, those moments, then we put their minds to something else and actually does what we want them to do in the end, which is to remember the content that they just received, but also have a fun time having a break and recharging them to actually get ready for the next thing that's on the schedule. That's the educational part. So I think that when we have those very moments that you just went through, that helps to bridge the educational part to the experiential part of events, which makes them magical to me.
100%, including time for play in that breeding ground for creative to really absorb all of that information and remember it, as opposed to just feel like exhausted and mentally just done for the day because it's been so much. Now, let me ask you a more, I guess, tactical question. During a hybrid event, do you think that it's important to connect the on-site and the virtual audience for the purpose of learning and networking?
Right. For a while, I did want to have that connection, and I did advocate for that connection. However, I think there's a shift in the hybrid planning and experience phase. And sometimes it's difficult to do that as much as we want to. But I think that, one, when we think about connecting both the virtual and the in-person, we have to understand the dynamics of doing so and how to actually do that. When I'm at an event and I'm in person, my mind is not to get on a phone or to go to a station to get onto a computer to then engage with people that are virtual, right? my mind, because the reason why we go to events a lot of the time is the networking. To have those conversations is not the same as if I'm online speaking to someone. I have the emotion, the synergy that is felt in person that doesn't always translate online, right? So I want to make sure that the people that are in person are still having that they're feeding themselves with that experience in person that they can't get online. But also, I want to still manage how the people that are virtual are navigating that virtual experience, right? And so I think that with hybrid events, they don't necessarily even have to have the connection of being simultaneously broadcast, where a live event is taking place and then the people online are actually watching that live moment. It doesn't always have to be that way, but I want to make sure that the people that are virtual still have the same experience, just taking it online, right? And they can have that experience with the same people that are equally watching with them and engaging with them. But while that is happening, I want them to set up times to actually schedule meetings and schedule an opportunity to talk to people that are there in person. I just don't want the people that are in person and experiencing a different experience to have to remove themselves from that moment to then get online to talk to someone. I think that they can still have that networking and they can still talk to one another, but just at a separate time where programming isn't actually taking place. So when I think of virtual events, I think of it in that realm versus trying to connect them all the time right when a virtual or a hybrid event is actually taking place.
You know, I love that you mentioned that, because as an event producer, I was always and have been for the last, 20 months of this virtual hybrid reality, driver's seat behind the scenes. So I attended this conference that had different parts of it virtual, but not the entire thing. And here's my aha moment as an attendee, because I haven't been in that position before. And that aha moment for me was, there was this awards that I was actually one of the nominees. I even won an award, and I was supposed to watch it virtually on one of the second days in the middle of the day. I put it in my calendar. I swore I was going to do it. Guess what? I was so busy meeting people in person that I missed my own awards because it was just so entertaining, and there's so much energy, and there's so much to do and talk. Everything was just so much fun. And then I went back and rewatched it afterwards, and I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. Yay, me. I missed it. Because you're right, like trying to do the in-person and virtual at the same time is just the timeline. It most likely is going to benefit the in-person connections over the virtual. So having the opportunity to possibly stagger the timeline in a way that let them all do their in-person thing, their networking, maybe schedule, other meetings in between virtually, if they're intentional about it. But otherwise, like having the opportunity to do that afterwards, when finally I'm like, okay, now I have time to breathe and go through my 1,000 emails that I try to ignore all this time. It's so important. But again, that was my aha moment from the attendee point of view, because I didn't realize how that actually plays in reality until you're there,
Yeah, I agree. And I was speaking at Biz Bash in Tampa this year, and one of the ways that they bridge the hybrid concept is by having some of the speakers actually be virtual. So everyone didn't have to present in person. And so that helps to tie in that virtual aspect. They did a panel, and one of the panelists was online. And I think that helps, but you can also stream that information, to people who just want to watch virtually. So there's so many different ways that you can do it. I just don't want people to feel as if they have to have a connection between the virtual audience and the in-person audience.
I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Now, let's go into a question of budget, event budget, because this is something where a lot of the questions about how are we going to make this happen, now that we're looking at 2 different events, 2 different experiences, 2 different event production, even support systems, may that be technology or production partner. Because I personally believe that not a lot of people know how to create this type of an event budget that will support their event properly, and it ends up becoming coming most likely underestimate their budget or very rarely overestimate, right? But most likely it's probably underestimate. I think you actually pull up a data that was like something, a number that you said it was like by 45%, most clients will underestimate their budget because they believe that they are able to get everything they want in the budget that they create. Now, what are some factors to consider when you're creating your event budget?
Yeah, I think that, especially the pandemic has shown us just, I guess, how ignorant we are. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but how ignorant we are when it comes to pricing. One example is the fact that many people thought that because we're going virtual, that means the event will be less. Many people thought that, and they say, okay, well, there's no venue, there's no food and beverage, etc. Yes, got it. However, for virtual, it's based off of bandwidth. It's based off of how many people does a virtual platform has to have capability of streaming to. The more people you have, the more it's going to cost. And in many cases, it's even more. I think about, for instance, the presidential election. I think about the Super Bowl. I think about the Grammys and all these other things that went virtual, that spent the same, if not more, to be able to create a virtual moment for millions of people. I think about concerts and how many people are watching that and how they had to pay to watch that because it just was too much money to stream to so many people globally. So when I think about how to create a budget, how to price, yes, I would say always go down your list, whether it's a virtual event, hybrid, or in person. Create a list of your must-haves. What are the things that you know that you are going to need to have this event be successful? If it's a virtual event platform, if it's a studio, if it's an actual venue, if it's food and beverage, if you're shipping that food or if you're serving it in person, just go down the list and think about all that you need, the marketing, the printed material, but then place a price next to every last one of them. And I say all the time, once you have that price, double it, because we assume that everything that we want is going to be less than what it actually is. I think about when we go to a restaurant and everyone says, well, why is a restaurant less money than food and beverage at a hotel or a catering company? Well, you're sharing the cost of labor and all of the equipment and everything at a restaurant with all the other people that are also eating at that restaurant that is not at your table. It's not the same when I go to an event. You're not sharing the cost of that event with anyone else. You're paying for all of that. So that's why it's a huge difference between what you eat at a restaurant and what you have at an actual event that's by yourself. So understanding those dynamics and then having a contingency. Many people don't have a contingency with their budgets. They say, hey, this is my budget. Everything has to fit in there. And that's not always the case because we know that inflation goes up every year. Even now, there's a supply chain shortage, right? And the demand for these things are going to increase the cost of these things, right? And so we have to understand what plays into pricing, what the price is set at, and so many other factors. So having that on your list, but also having that A and B list, hey, this is my must-have things. This is my I wish to have things, right? And take care of the must-have things first. And then if you have money left over, then of course, go through that I wish to have and then add it on based off of priority. So I think that starting there and that framework is easy, but do some research too. If I think about the virtual event platforms, most of them now have starting prices. When we started this pandemic, it was difficult to see what the cost of a virtual event platform was if you didn't do a demo, if you didn't talk to a sales rep and go through all of that, hoopla just to get pricing. But now a lot of them are showing the price of their services online. So I think that doing some research also can help you understand how to build a budget and have better expectations.
Top-notch advice right there, Andrew. This is what we paid you for to come here. Just kidding. This is such a great honor to have you share all this experience with our audience. Before we move any further, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our main sponsor, Trifan Events, which is a boutique event planning and production agency that will come alongside you, offering personalized event planning and technical support, strategic event design, production and technology management, and flawless execution for live, virtual, and hybrid events. The team at Trifan Events is passionate about planning and producing event experiences that get people involved with true moments of interaction, engagement, and co-creation, while offering white glove treatment throughout the entire planning process, enabling you to reach your event goals with the use of creativity, production tools, and event technology. To find out how Trifan Events can plan and produce your event become memorable, go to trifanevents.com. Now, we all know the event industry is not an easy industry to be in, to work in, to even make way in. Yep. And I'm just curious from your point of view, is there any maybe tips, tricks, tools that you would want to share to help maybe some event planners that are just now thinking and preparing to get into this industry so they can thrive, especially in the future of what the event and meeting planning looks like?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I have a lot of tips, but I'll give a few. The first thing is to know who you are and know where you want to go in this industry and to have the best expectation possible. A lot of times people see the pretty, they see the glamorous side, they see the activation stations, they see the receptions and the decor and all that. And they're like, yeah, I want to get into the industry and do that. But they forget all the work that takes place. Like the pretty is like 20% of what we do, right? It takes the rest of that, 80% of hard work behind the scenes, long hours, fighting to get prices, fighting to get things that you need to actually get to that point. So it really is important for anyone to say, yes, I want to get in this industry, but understand where you want to go and understand that you can't be everything. Me as a planner, I don't do every event. I understand the events that I love to do and the ones I'm very good at, and that's what I stick to. So understanding the type of client you want, what level of client you want, how to, have personal branding, how to have your company branding, how to story tell, and most importantly, how to run your business. Because a lot of people are great at designing and coming up with these beautiful concepts, but their customer service is horrible. They don't understand taxes. They don't understand pricing well. They don't understand how to have more than one person on their team. You'd be surprised how many business owners are not even employed themselves, maybe a 1099, but they're not a W-2, employee. So the business aspect of it is so essential. Constantly learn, constantly, get your certificates and go through programs that are going to help you get to where you want to be. Of course, you don't have to have a certificate in everything. You don't have to have a degree in everything. You just have to have that foundational support to get you where you want to go. When you have that, then you're unstoppable.
100%. And there's a lot of resources for anyone that is curious and wants to dig more into that. If you would like to connect with us, we'll more than gladly share that. What I wanted to highlight a little bit, because this is something that actually you posted on one of your LinkedIn posts, which I love, because you were going sort of like down a list, like a laundry list of things that a lot of people, like you said, everybody thinks of events is just the glamour. And honestly, like if you look at my Instagram story reel, you see the glamour, like you see all the fun stuff, you see all the cool lights, and you see all the production, but what you don't see is the number of working hours, which most likely is going to be non-traditional, it's going to be long. You're not going to see me chasing down my vendors for getting the quotes, or all those clients that just pretend like they ghost you, they never like heard from you. And sometimes there's also a lot of stress that's embedded in there. Yeah. And I loved how you were just talking about all those things that it's not glamorous. It takes a lot of persistence and it takes a lot of self-motivation to keep pushing through, especially when there is so much work to be done. You can't just stand out in our event industry, which is already oversaturated, not put in the hours and not try to differentiate yourself from everybody else's that can just as well do, a better job than you, but find that one place that you shine and maybe leverage that.
Absolutely.
You said it. I'm just saying, I'm emphasizing what you said was fantastic. I loved it. Now, I want to dive a little bit into our next topic, and it's not an easy topic, to be honest. It's difficult to approach because it's very sensitive. Yep. And I love how passionate you are about educating others about everything that has to do with diversity and inclusion and equity. So how do we bring about diversity in events that really makes a difference for especially minority business owners?
Yep. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to first take a self-assessment of what you have done in the past. And that assessment should really highlight, one, who are the clients that you've actually done work for? What do they look like? What sector do they come from? Are they charities that are supporting marginalized communities? Or are they pharmaceutical companies? Or are they whoever it is? Look and take stock of your clients. But also, at the same time, and I like to use event planners as an example because event planners have so much power to bring on other vendors. So if I'm an event planner, I honestly have the trust of my client to say, hey, we're going to use this catering company. We're going to use this person does customizations and they can build things. And we're going to use this customer for AV or this vendor as a florist, et cetera, et cetera. I have that power. It's very rare that I get to a client who says, hey, these are all the vendors that I want to use. It's very rare for that to happen. And so if I can look at all the events that I've done over the years, I should be able to say, does everybody look the same? And when I say look the same, I mean, is everyone Black? Is everyone white? Is everyone Mexican or Hispanic? Is everyone Jewish? Who do they look like?
Is everyone male versus female, right? Especially for female-owned businesses?
Is it everyone female? Is it diverse based off of the people that I've hired again and again and again? And if it is not, then I have to take the ownership, whether it's trying to find new clients or trying to find new vendors to make my infrastructure diverse. Because when we think about diversity, especially equity, a lot of people don't understand how much money you put into someone else's business by bringing them on to a client, right? So if I am giving money and referrals time and time again to the same people versus trying to diversify the team that I'm building for my client, I am taking money out of the economy, a diverse economy, to only put it into the hands of a person that looks the exact same as I do. And I think that we have to understand how powerful that is because we have the power to control if a company stays in business or not. When I think about the supplier diversity programs that so many companies have that are in corporate positions around this world that do little to nothing to ensure that diverse companies are brought on for events, I think that we're doing a disservice to those marginalized companies in marginalized communities that love producing and participating in events. And if we are not building a diverse audience of vendors to be able to execute high caliber events, then we're going to get to the point that we are finding ourselves in this conversation time after time after time. A lot of people say, well, I'm not, DEI qualified. I can't do this. I don't, know how to do that. Find the things that you can actually bring about change. The things that I just brought up are easy ways that you can bring about change. If I'm an event organizer and I'm doing a conference, is everybody on that conference white? Male in particular? And I want to make sure that I have diverse people on the list of keynote speakers, the list of panelists, the list of sponsors, the list of vendors that I'm bringing on to help create this conference and this experience for people. I think of associations, and I think of how many associations I go through time and time again, and everyone on that association's board of directors or leadership team is white. And I think that it's unfair because you have hundreds of thousands of members that are diverse. and you're not representing those members in the places that matter the most. So I think that we just have to see how many ways, how many avenues diversity, equity, and inclusion are really being harmful to us as event professionals when it is not actually exercised to benefit us all. So, you have the pros and cons on both sides. We just have to make sure that when we're talking about DEI, it's really going to help us all versus doing things that work against it.
Now, as a business owner, a minority business owner, are there some things that you can do or maybe pay attention to some of the opportunities that might come your way, but sadly, you're not ready for?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very good point. I think a lot of organizations that are minority owned only self-certify, right? So if I talk about a supplier diversity program, most of those programs want to make sure that you're actually certified. I can self-certify because I'm a Black male, but that doesn't hold weight when I am trying to compete against other organizations that are actually certified as a business owner, right? A lot of companies aren't even incorporated in some fashion. They don't have an LLC, they don't have a S Corp or C Corp, whatever you name it, as their business. They're only operating as a brand that does not have any legal, they're not a legal entity. So we want to make sure that we do that. But we also want to make sure that we have the proper capability statements out there. The capability statement should list everything that you're capable of doing as an event company and making sure that that is sent out to people. You want to apply and challenge others to make sure that when you're applying for a position that they actually have an equal opportunity program or statement or policy in place to make it fair for you to be able to bid for RFP or anything like that. But it really is important for us to say, look, I know that I failed at some things. I need to get myself in order so that way I could not give anyone a reason to not hire me as a minority owned business. But it's important that no one's responsible or required to hire you simply by being a minority owned business. You have to have the qualifications. If someone says that you have to be a meeting planner certified, then you have to do that. I mean, that's not a point of discrimination. It's a requirement. And if you don't have that, then you can't say, oh, someone is discriminating against me because I don't have this certificate or this qualification or etc. Those are things that you have to have. It then is a different thing if they say, yes, you have that, but we can't hire you because of the color of your skin or anything else. So
which they would never say, but they're gonna find something else. Right.
They will. They will. Yes, absolutely.
Well, those are some fantastic, insightful tips, and I'm so happy and grateful that I have you here to share, because again, it is a sensitive topic. Sometimes we feel like so unprepared to even like bring it up, and as we're coming to time here, how do you keep yourself in a healthy mental space, especially, when you navigate a challenging time?
Yeah, the thing I am a champion on is moving yourself out of hectic situations and environments, taking the time to pause and just enjoy the moment that you have. Think about the things that you've accomplished, think about the things that you want to do, and just pave the way to get to that point. I think so many people are in a position mentally where they feel they have to always be on, they always have to be present, they have to be visible on social media, they have to go to this conference, this event, and that event. And I'm like, you know what? During this pandemic, I realized I don't have to do any of that. I only have to wake up every day and understand that I'm enough, that anything I want to do that day, even if it's to get through my emails or if it's to, go to a therapist or anything like that, that's more than enough, that I don't always have to fill my calendar and my schedule with so many things that I forget who I am as a person, because what I do is not the same as who I am. And I think that so many people want to feel as if they're booked and busy, that's a badge of honor. And to me, honestly, I have pulled away from that. I have, even now with my staff, our operating hours are Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we've chosen, to only do a certain amount of corporate events and a certain amount of weddings and social events throughout the month, because we have to have boundaries. We have to establish those boundaries if we want to keep our sanity. So finding things that I love to do outside of work, going to a therapist, going to the gym, traveling, meeting my friends, going out for a glass of wine, rock climbing, all of these other things that I still love to do and who I am, I must not, sacrifice those things because I want to be at work all day long. I don't want that. That's a toxic trait that we have to get rid of and really celebrate who we are as people, because when we do that, we come to work with our full selves, right? We come to work excited to meet our clients, excited to produce events and partner with other people and to network and all those things, because we are understanding the dynamics of a positive work-life balance. And when you don't have that, you're going to be stressed. You're going to quit, doing the things that you love doing. And we don't want that for ourselves. So that's what I would say when it comes to, work life and enjoying who you are and showing up as your full self and protecting who you are.
You know what? I love that you bring so much positive energy as you talk about this subject, because it is a very hard talk to walk. No. When the rubber meets the road, it's very hard to implement that. It takes courage. As a small business owner, I know that my to-do list is like laundry miles long, and I've got to do so many things, and I feel overwhelmed at the end of the day, and yet I feel like I don't have enough hours in the day to go through everything that I want to. But then that is at the cost of me actually pausing and being creative within the things that matter. And I realized for myself, I'm like, man, I need to pause on so many things right now. Yes, the holidays are coming. It's getting a little bit more chaotic. Like you said, it's time to remove yourself from the chaos of even maybe social media. And I'm working hard at trying to implement a little bit of a social media fast. When I told my husband my goals for the end of the year, with that, he kind of laughed because he knows me too much and knows how hard it would be for me to do that. But I'm like, I have to, because if I don't, I just basically fall into the same patterns, repeat the same things, and then I just expect different results, which never, ever works. Yep. Here's one last piece of advice that I would love for you, if you wanted to share with our audience.
Oh, one piece of advice? Yeah, that's good. So I would say this as far as goal settings. I like to tell everyone that, because we're coming up to the end of the year, and the end of the year, everyone's talking about, the New Year's resolutions and coming up with vision boards and things like that. So I think that we have to understand what our primary goals are, and that everyone that sets a goal should only set 3 at a time, right? And make sure that you accomplish those 3 goals before moving on to your next group of goals. You don't want to have a list of 20 goals that you want to try to accomplish all at one time. Set aside for yourself 3 key goals, but also ask for help. A lot of people don't ask for help, and it's crazy, but ask for help to accomplish those goals. Put those goals in the atmosphere. We cannot do everything by ourselves. So when we have a foundation of people willing to help us to reach those goals, we can accomplish those goals faster and then get on with the next set of goals. So if anything, identify what those goals are, find the people to help you accomplish those goals, and then celebrate your goals. Don't rush past them to the next thing. Celebrate them, enjoy them, and embrace that moment of accomplishing those goals.
Andrew, I just love you and your advice. I mean, you're just my best friend right now, because you have such healthy mindset on all those things that we talked about. I mean, I don't know, I wish you were any closer so we can go and celebrate this, with a drink, with a glass of wine, whatever. But I'm so grateful that we got to talk today. I'm so grateful that you got the time to just share some of your insightful tips from your experience and your expertise. Where can our audience connect with you if they want to reach out, or if they have questions, or I don't know, if they just want to maybe say, hey, Andrew, I would love to just follow you because you're amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been great. So I appreciate you, having me on today. If anyone wants to, reach out or connect with me, you can find me everywhere at Andrew Roby Events. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and of course our website, andrewrobyevents.com.
Thank you. You think that he's got a lot to say right now? No, he's got a lot to say all the time, and it's good stuff, okay? Because there's a lot of people that can say a lot of things, but not everything is like solid.
Yeah.
So it is my great pleasure to have had you on to host you today, Andrew. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay, my beautiful dear friends, that is a wrap for today's episode. If you did not take at least 10 tips out of today's episode, I do not think you listen well, and you need to re-listen or rewatch. Thank you to all of you listening in the US as well as around the world. I'm super grateful for you wherever you are and whatever you're tuning in from. Please do take a moment to subscribe to Events Demystified on your favorite listening platform. And if you want to take it just one step further, leave a 5-star review to make this podcast visible to more event professionals like yourself, or maybe even like take a screenshot when you're listening and share it with your network. And to end on one of Andrew's quotes, relax a little, enjoy this ride, avoid becoming either too serious or too self-righteous or superior or a drama creator. Life is actually a whole lot better than we often perceive in the short term. And yet enjoying life happens best in the short term too, in this moment of presence. The holiday season is coming, and what better time than to exercise kindness, empathy, and love. Until next time, thank you so much for being with us today.